Hey everybody, welcome back. This is the continuation of our episode number 260, which was the literary inspirations and ties to Rush lyrics. We've got our esteemed panel again, David, myself, Paul, Alex, and Rob. Thank you, gentlemen, for continuing this fun discussion. We kind of felt like we were running out of like a time period last time, but we are nowhere near finished talking about this because this is just too fun. So before we get started, if you guys watched episode one or the first part of this, I guess this is going to be two parts, I'm assuming, right? Thank you for doing that. Don't forget to give us a like and a subscribe. The links to our sponsors are there. Check out our merch store. Yeah, just check out all that stuff. Get you some cool merch. I gotta order another shirt. I know what I want to.
Same, same.
Yeah, that's right. All right, cool. All right, so we ended with Hold Your Fire. What a awesome album. I know the sort of the 80s synth era is not necessarily everybody's favorite, but I happen to love it. And I think Hold Your Fire was a completely brilliant album. And then after they recorded a show of hands, well, that leads us into Presto. Another fantastic album. Okay, they're all fantastic, but All right, so for Presto, what do we have here? Were there any inspirations on Presto? Nah, we'll skip it. What do we got?
My gateway album. Go Rob.
Yeah.
I mean, Red Tide for one. The Mask of the Red Death by Edgar Allan Poe.
Mm.
So the line that was kind of inspired from that was the party is disrupted by the uninvited guest, which is, of course, death. So, and also before that, we have nature has a new plague to run in our streets. So that's also part of that. But I think that's Dylan Thomas. So there's two for one on this one, I
And
think.
piggybacking off the Dylan Thomas, "Do not go let us not go gently in the endless winter night" alludes to, of course, "Do not go gently into that good night" from 1951. With "Do not go gentle into that good night, old age should burn and rave at close of day, rage, rage against the dying of light." So, yep,
Yeah. Oh,
lots of Thomas in
geez.
that one.
Yeah. Heck yeah. Man, awesome.
And if
And
I were
Presto,
to
oh, go out.
yet again, I'm just going to quickly throw in, as
Oh
far
yeah.
as last time I was talking about screenplays and whatnot. Obviously, and then we brought up Cinderella Man as far as
Hmm.
Mr. Deeds. I mean, they still had their reference from Candygram for Mongo in Blazing Saddles to Anagram for Mongo, and it's not as literary or whatnot, but just the inside joke from the band as far as pop culture and so once again a screenplay, but it's a
Yeah.
stretch.
And
No, but
also,
I
pop culture was actually kind of cool,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And yeah,
Yeah. Got from Presto, I radiate more heat than light. Old Confucius quote of "It's better to radiate light than heat." The common understanding of that being if a discussion generates more heat than light, it doesn't provide answers but does make people angry. I'm not saying that is the translation. That is a common understanding of that phrase. So
yeah.
taking us way back.
And light being
Yeah.
illumination, understanding, growth, and wisdom. Heat just being heat.
Power, anger, what have you.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah.
So those are the two I
Cool.
have.
Nice.
So
All right. Well, that's the end of the 80s. Wow. Yeah, that's right, because Presto came out in 89, I believe.
Hmm. Yep,
All right.
November
So that
89.
was, yep. It's a good month. All right.
Well, it's a great month for people in East Germany.
Mm.
Mhm.
All right. So now we got the 90s.
total lock on the entire conversation.
We should
Yeah.
quit having fun,
Well,
guys. We're doing something
Yeah.
serious
What?
here.
What? All right. So now into the 90s, roll the bones. Why are we here? All right. So what
Because
do
we're
we
here.
have? We got roll the bones stuff? References?
I didn't pull any references. My main
Why?
takeaway from then, as mentioned in the roundtables, and again, a reminder to our viewers and listeners
Mm.
that any one particular citation we make, our Rush Roundtable series, we're all the way up to Snakes and Arrows. So do go
Oh,
back.
that's right.
Oh,
Yeah.
I like that Red Tide reference. Well, we talked for between a half an hour and 40 minutes on those references on our Red Tide episode. But that being said, Roll the Bones, throughout that entire album, that discussion in the Roundtable series was I didn't grab any specific ones for this episode, but that was a lot of interviews with Neil around that time. He was talking about his prose writing, so I alluded to that in the previous episode, but
Yeah.
this was where he was really influenced by that in his lyric writing.
Yeah.
So
Nice. Yeah. Yeah, so yeah, because I guess the after the Show of Hands album, we still have the four studio and a live album, right? We got Presto, Roll the Bones, Counterparts, Test for Echo before different stages came out, right? So we could just look at that era. If you
Mhm.
guys have anything from the next one I have is from Vapor Trails, so
Well,
I
there is
didn't.
a Roll the Bones reference.
Oh, okay.
Fritz Leiber, gonna roll the bones.
Ah, yeah.
Well, and
So yeah,
also Greek mythology again, Icarus. If we burn our wings flying through too close to the sun. So
Bravado.
Yeah.
Bravado has it right away.
Yep.
And
Yeah.
also, I do believe Neil said in the Roll the Bones tour book, "We will pay the price, but we will not count the cost." Is a line from the Tidewater Tales by John Barth, which Neil said that Barth said he could use it. So
Ah,
Neil's seeking out his writers to say, "Hey, I'm thinking of you doing this. Sure, go for it." So
wow.
Totally.
Bravado alone
Nice.
is
Yeah. It's
got something to offer.
got a couple, yeah. I love that line too. We will
Mm.
pay the price, but we will not count the cost. That's ooh, yeah.
yeah. Gonna roll the bones is actually that was a fantasy novel. Um, Fritz Leiber was actually an American
Oh,
novelist, and that came out in 1967, I
Mm.
think.
good year.
Yeah. And if you know, I was going to say this in the last episode or the previous portion of the overall episode. You could still go to neilpeart.net and click on Bubba's Book Club. And there were only like
Ah,
five, I think, five or six, where he reviewed books he happened to be reading at the time.
Yeah.
And what is lovely about Neil's book reviews is they're not pedantic. You know, you read so many people, whether it's on social media, whatever, they try to fancy themselves as great readers of literature, and they just try to write just it's loquacious.
yeah.
Or Neil's just he's got the brain, but
Hmm.
he just wrote very straightforward how he felt about the things he was reading and what they meant to him. And some of the best book reviews ever.
Wow.
Mm.
Okay. I might have to. I have not been to that site in
Yeah.
golly, such a long time.
So essentially, David is saying that Neil's whole mode of writing was to cut to the chase.
Ah, there you go.
See what you did there.
Yeah, he didn't want to stick it out. He just wanted to animate, right? He was nobody's hero.
No, he
Well, he
wasn't
was,
in it for the
he
everyday
was here to a
glory.
lot of
I
us.
could go on, but I
Yes.
won't.
Okay, so I've got a double agent off counterparts.
Yeah, that's a cold fire, man. All right.
For
Hey,
double agent,
everyday
removing
glory.
all the Carl Jung from it, because I didn't want
Don't
to go
remove
too much
Carl
into
Jung.
psychology with the whole album. Aristotle's On the Heavens, 350 BC, a man being just as hungry as thirsty and placed in between food and drink must necessarily remain where he is and starve to death. The whole idea of the choice between darkness and light. So while inspired by Jung, there's the reference to Aristotle is in there.
Yeah.
So
And
Yeah.
for
Cool.
double
And
agent, Rob, are we? Was I interrupting Rob?
No, I was just
Okay.
gonna say nobody's hero since it came up already.
oh,
Off of Nietzsche's human, all too human book, which is kind of like the ideas of heroism and human. So that was one thing that he kind of pulled from that particular book. So, little
yeah.
Nietzsche. thrown in the mix.
Wow.
Nietzsche. I think it's Nietzsche, right? I think I'm pronouncing it wrong.
Nietzsche.
No, it's
Friedrich Nietzsche.
exactly Nietzsche. Yeah, Neil was a great reader and admirer of Friedrich Nietzsche. And what's great because you can see that if you read Nietzsche, um, he objected to most of the entire history of Western philosophy and its focus on rationality and its suppression of instincts and living in the body and whatnot. And whether it's counterparts, Hold Your Fire, especially. Neil definitely gave a nod to Nietzsche in terms of what it means to live in the body. Yeah, great stuff. And as far as Jung, Animate is a great
Right.
testament to Jungian archetypes
Yeah.
and whatnot. And if, I happen to have a friend and a mentor who is a Jungian psychoanalyst, blah, 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 blah,
Okay.
I
blah,
should have
blah.
left the blah shirt on.
We changed
Yeah.
that.
I was so disappointed when you didn't, but that's okay. But what I've learned from him about Jung is very much about the life of the mind, but it's the life of the mind lived in the body, and being in contact with ourselves. And Neil, gosh, he read and knew so much. Yeah,
Yeah.
great stuff.
He did. He did. Very smart man.
Now, if I could shoehorn it back to a Double Agent for a second.
Okay.
The novel Wilderness of Mirrors by David Martin that came out in 1980 was a novel that spoke to the double agent concept between CIA and KGB, because obviously all of us were, aware enough in 1980 to recognize the Cold War. So that was in full swing.
Yep. Oh yeah. Which means we're all old. That's pretty much what that means.
Yes.
Ish.
Okay.
Hence
Not
what would be
old,
called
just
dad
older.
jokes and stuff like that.
Yeah. Oh yeah. All right.
Got a couple tests for echoes.
Oh yeah.
I got a couple other counterparts actually.
Oh yeah.
I'm gonna
Please.
go for it. Cold
Yeah,
Fire. There was a 1991 horror novel by Dean Koontz named Cold Fire. Now, it's difficult for me to imagine that Neil might have been reading Dean Koontz, but he probably could have powered through the book in a day or two if he was, had downtime on tour. So maybe he was in a bookshop, saw the title and thought, Cold Fire sounds cool. Not that I'm trying to rail on Dean Koontz, but which in some ways I guess I am. But he's certainly more accomplished writer than me. But yeah. So that 1991 predated this song, Cold Fire. And while we're at it, let's go to the Alien Shore. There was a book titled The Alien Shore, sci-fi novel by Celia Friedman. That was out. What do I have that? Oh, how foolish of me! That actually was out. That came out after the song. I should have looked at my dates more closely. I wonder if someone's copying Neil on that one.
Oh, and it's called The Alien Shore?
Sorry. This Alien Shore.
This Alien Shore.
Yeah, so like 1998, 99. So yeah, this is someone who was pulling off of Neil, Celia S. Friedman. So or we could assume maybe she is a fan or someone in her life is a fan.
Yeah. Yeah, originally
but Counterparts was too good of an album. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Counterparts was... Well, it actually says here, well, okay, the Wikipedia says that this Alien Shore was originally released in August 1998. Is that what you have for your...
Yeah.
dates as
So
well?
like the hardcover 98, saw the paperback 99.
Huh.
And it may or may not be connected.
Who knows, right? Yeah.
So we'll have to read it. And if there are any of you out there watching this episode that can enlighten us,
if you've read it, tell us. Maybe the answer is, it had nothing to do with anything. I guess it's always possible.
Losers,
Commenting's available.
Yeah.
Now, I'm gonna throw out one more, and I'm gonna shoehorn this thing way off of, not way off, but off of Counterparts, off of Neil's lyrics, because you stop and think about this time frame. Counterparts 2, Test for Echo, Lifeson put out his Victor album. It's not Neil writing the lyrics, it's Alex Lifeson writing the lyrics. But you know he was inspired by his bandmate of so many years, who was the best lyricist in rock. And I'm just going to say the
Yeah.
best lyricist in rock because we're all going
Yeah.
to say it.
Oh,
W.H.
yeah.
Auden had the poem titled Victor that basically was a strong inspiration for the Victor Project.
Huh.
Yeah, that's true.
Well, there you go.
Yeah, it's
I
not all
did not
shut
know
up,
that.
shutting up. It's not all,
Yeah.
it's not all just his wife getting drunk with her friend in the studio.
Yeah, you don't need to rent studio time to do that.
Yeah, you can just stick a mic in the living room.
Hey,
I was
well, yeah,
looking
you
at
got you could certainly do that nowadays. Back in the day,
Yeah.
you had to rent some studio time to get a proper recording.
and that won't be the last time this episode we hear of W.H. Auden, so
No, okay.
there will be one coming up.
Yeah,
All
definitely a
right.
lot to say about that, but
Yeah.
I'll be quiet.
All right, we got a test for echo, a couple test for echoes.
I got two tests for echoes.
All right.
Resist. I can
Yeah.
resist everything except temptation is a quote from Lady Windermere's Fan by Oscar Wilde, 1892. And Carvoy the Stone pick somebody, but I just chose Homer. Many wrote about Sisyphus, but Homer describes Sisyphus in both Book 6 of the Iliad and Book 11 of the Odyssey.
Yeah.
So,
I think Sisyphus also came up in Dante's Purgatorio.
I believe so.
Yeah. I mean,
Or
everybody
like,
knows Dante's Inferno, but nobody knows the Purgatorio or the Paradiso. But Sisyphus did come up, I think, in Purgatorio.
Okay.
those are my two tests for echoes.
Yeah, I don't have any test for echoes. I love the album. I absolutely love it. I know not everybody does, but I don't have any references there.
Yeah. Well, in Resist, you have Lord Darlington, right? He's talking to Lady Windermere, trying to kind of come on to her or whatever, and she's very proper and everything else. And his pickup line, if you want to call it that, was, um, "I can resist everything but temptation." And Neil and maybe this was Getty's editing for his vocals, I can learn to resist anything but temptation. But the actual line was, I can resist everything but temptation. And the idea behind that is you can't resist anything at all, because if it's not tempting you, you're not resisting. And that's sort of
Mm.
the point of that line. But, Neil kind of, shall we say, repackaged that into, if listen to the rest of the song, um I can learn to resist anything but injustice and all that. And so,
Yeah.
in other words, making temptation, the things you're tempted to, virtuous.
Mm. Very
And that
cool.
song was almost called Taboo. And from Sigmund Freud, totem and taboo.
Mhm.
So, of course, in his bit, totem is like being what we worship, and taboo is the thing that I guess resist is the thing that was also sort of included in this with the song itself. I think taboo was being what we fear. So those are the two bits of that particular book.
Mm.
Right.
Okay.
But that song was almost called Taboo, but became Resist. So
Mhm. Cool.
Okay. Yeah, I think I think Resist is a better title.
uh,
Yeah. All right, cool. All right, well, that's our 90s bit. Then we get into the rest of them, right? So we have Vapor Trails. Okay, I'm skipping like feedback and crap like that, right? But, well, sorry, it's not crap. It's just not stuff that they wrote, right?
Yeah.
Heresy.
Yeah, right. So Vapor Trails, Snakes and Arrows,
Clockwork
and
Angels.
Clockwork. That's it.
Hmm.
Yep.
The last three. Wow.
Comes quickly.
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah. the only one that I have for Vapor Trails is Out of the Cradle, right? Neil had attributed the title and one of the key lines to Walt Whitman's 1959 poem about his birth as a poet, Out of the Cradle, Endlessly Rocking. So, but I also read that the poem is really talking about death, and the song is really talking more about life, right? So we kind of flipped around sort of the
See
meaning
the
of what's
round
being talked there.
table. We go into
Yeah.
great depth on that. I think almost all of us were on that one. We go into great
Yeah,
depth on
check
that.
that out for sure. Yeah.
Yes.
And then,
Yeah.
one of the things to note about Niels, I mean, he was so well read and broadly read. His songs that are inspired by things that he read aren't necessarily commentaries or book reviews, right? They
Right.
were ideas that inspired him, and he wrote about those. And, in my field, in philosophy and what's called philosophical hermeneutics, the theory of interpretation, a text isn't just about what the author meant, but language has this really cool quality where even beyond what the author meant, there are new worlds that could be unfolded in front of the text. And I think Neil's reading and experience of literature, and then him reinterpreting that in his lyrics, created new worlds, new possibilities that weren't necessarily just a book report, for lack of a better word. He wasn't doing book reports.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, he was, you know, imagining new worlds.
Well, I know I read in or I heard in the interviews from the archives around. I keep going back to that Presto Roll the Bones time period where he was working so hard at his writing. One thing I know he was focusing on, he talked about numerous times in interviews, was his alliteration and his style of creating a fictionalized like scenario for the story. Because a lot of people asked if Presto or Coldfire were autobiographical, and he said, "No, I'm creating these situations and putting these characters into there." But with,
Mm.
like I said, his alliterations and things like that, that was really,
Yeah.
really important to. I think we made the point during the roundtables. Some people had, I won't say criticized, but talked about how some albums seemed more lyric focused and some albums seemed like Testreco were more drum focused or percussion focused. And
Yeah.
it almost seemed like the writing focus era of Presto and Roll the Bones transitioned into the percussion focal area of or era of Testreco and then their counterparts in Testreco. So
Yeah.
that point had come up during the roundtables.
Interesting. Yeah.
So also on Vapor Trails, I've got Stars Look Down. The title was inspired. The title alone was taken from A.J. Cronin's 1935 book of the same name. Lyrics were not based on the book, but the essays from Francis Bacon, 1601, a collection of essays which inspire morality, etc. The beginning of the essay of Vainglory quotes Aesop's The Fly and the Draft Mule, although it is actually paraphrasing. I'm not going to get this right. Abstemious, a fly upon the wheel, like the fly on the wheel who says what a lot of dust we're raising. And I know we went into a ton of detail on the round table for that one. So I see you guys going, I remember that. So that's one of 5 I have off this album.
And a lot of these books, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Okay, I'm just going to do a
I'm
quick
just gonna
one
do a tangent.
and
Sure.
vault it back to you. One of the things I think of as far as that we did discuss on, on every song on Vapor Trails, which is worth going back to watch. A lot of shameless plugs here tonight. Deal with them.
Yeah.
Every song had a tarot, and at that point, regardless of what someone might think about tarot cards, it is the sort of thing where they took the time, at least Neil took the time, probably the whole band was in on it, to basically, ascribe a tarot that has its inherent meaning, its personality to a song. And at that point, I mean, a famous deck is the Aleister Crowley deck, which he has a book on, which I bought, decades ago. So I mean, I kind of, once again, I'm reaching for the sidelines for a lot of my references as far as in that case, the idea of literature and that aspect of written culture. what they're pulling from, not just here's a stack of books that Neil likes, that kind of thing.
Right.
Again, I shall mute and just punt it back.
No, excellent point.
It is a
I
great
forget what I
point.
was going to say, so it probably wasn't important, as my mother would tell me if I can't forget it or can't remember it. But what you were talking about, the tarot cards and whatnot, that's symbolism. And again, I'm going to refer to one of my favorite philosophers, Paul Ricoeur, in his 1967 book, The Symbolism of Evil. One of the most brilliant essays at the end of that book deals with how the symbol gives rise to thought, right? If I'm I used to work in the car industry. I was a service writer, which was kind of funny because other than changing my own oil, I knew nothing about cars. But people would tell me, I'd say, where does it hurt? And I'd write it down on the text, would do that. So I was very familiar with the Chilton manuals, right? So it's not a matter of an exact, I read this manual and this tells me what to do to the car, but rather it's creative. Like I mentioned earlier, it's kind of world creating. Symbols give rise to thought. So in the tarot cards and whatnot, uh, I think for Neil, especially with the kind of mind that he had, it wasn't about decoding a meaning, but it was learning how to think about the world and live in it well, you know. So when you get to kind of fast forward a little bit, at the end, the measure of life, it's a measure of love and respect. And that comes
Yeah.
about by learning how to live in the world. And that's what symbols do. They're poetic. It's not just straightforward, this means that. Tolkien was famous for saying he hated allegories.
Mhm.
Why did he hate allegories? Because an allegory is, this character, this whatever is a symbol of, or not a symbol per se, but this means that.
Represents, yeah.
Represents,
I
yeah.
remember the
Yeah.
World War II thing that really angered him when he was asked about that when it came to Lord of the Rings. Exactly.
Yeah. So, right, he was his close friend, C.S. Lewis. The Chronicles of Narnia was an allegory. And Tolkien, as much as he loved Lewis, hated Narnia because it was an allegory. Aslan was this, or the stone
Yeah.
table was that. And
Yeah.
Tolkien said, "Oh no, symbols have to be fluid and give rise to many possibilities." So that's the difference between the kind of writing that Lewis did, which I love Lewis, uh, and what Tolkien was trying to do. And I think Neil is more in line with Tolkien than he was Lewis in the sense of his writing, um, and the symbols, whether it be the tarot cards and vapor trails, supposed to just spur thought to make you continue the journey.
Yeah.
I'll grab my first tangent of the conversation. That just reminded me of one of the archived interviews that we were doing during during Counterpart, sorry, where he
Counter
actually
fire,
said, right,
cold parts.
one of the exceptions to that was Nobody's Hero, because as he said he likes to write in broad strokes and leave it open to interpretation. But when people were misinterpreting Nobody's Hero, it really, really stuck in his craw, made him angry visibly, and because he's like, some people are usurping the narrative here and saying it's about this when it's not. And it was just interesting to see because I'd never seen, and I don't know if I saw that ever again, but he was very specific about what Nobody's Hero, the stories that had inspired that. He's like, nope, it's about these people. I'm like,
Yeah,
wow,
and
that's
that
kind of
song
cool.
actually presented that in that way,
Yeah,
Yeah.
right? It
It did.
wasn't something that was open-ended. He was telling a particular story
yep,
about
Yeah.
particular things, and that was clear in the kind of writing, right? So you don't read poetry the same way you read a Chilton manual. That's a horrible kind of analogy, but the point is, Nobody's Hero is a straightforward kind of writing about particular people
yes,
and events and human experience,
yeah.
as
Yeah.
was Cold Fire and Everyday Glory, I think.
There you
Great
go.
album.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Fantastic album.
We keep going back and forth.
Hey, that's okay.
Paper
That's
Trails, Counterparts.
Oh,
I got
it's
my next
just
Vapor Trails one.
yeah,
Secret
go for it.
Touch. Uh,
Mm.
There's Never Love Without Pain was inspired by the 1999 novel Sister of My Heart by another name I'm going to butcher. Chitra. Oh, Lord. David, do you know this? Banerjee
Where
Divakaruni. And then also the 1915 novel Victory, which I know Neil was a huge fan of. He wrote about that on neilpeart.net. Um, uh, Victory inspired the line Secret Touch of the Heart. That's where he got that from. He actually wrote
Yeah.
about that inspiration. Those writings are still on that website. So,
I got two quick ones.
yeah.
yeah.
One is Earthshine, which is a term described by Leonardo da Vinci. So when the sunlight is reflected by the Earth to illuminate the moon, and then of course from that you get the lyric on certain nights when the angles are right. So that's
Mm.
that. And the other little quick thing I want to mention, speaking of screenplays and film, Brigadoon, 1954. So the film inspired the quote, or the quote inspired from the film, however you want to put it. It's not the heat, it's the inhumanity. So those are my two ones for you.
Forgot totally about that one. Good
Brilliant.
call.
Oh wow. Yeah. Wow.
Yep.
Man, cool. They're all over the place, these references.
Yep. Ceiling Unlimited. Playful take on Oscar Wilde's reversal of the Victorian lament, Drink is the Curse of the Working Class, posthumously accredited to him in 1916.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Oh.
I'm going to throw out there. And two more off Vapor Trails, unless I don't want to
Go
bogart all the
for it.
Vapor Trails, because after that I'll be
No,
out.
go for it.
How It Is, of Time in the River, A Legend of Man's Hunger in His Youth by Thomas Wolfe, 1935 novel, was the inspiration for some of those. And from Vapor Trail, which is, as I said during that roundtable, my favorite song off of that album, Funeral Blues by W.H. Auden, originally from the 1936 play, The Ascent of F6, if I wrote that down right. Inspired All the Stars Fade from the Night, the Oceans Drain Away, and other lines were pulled from Edward Abbey's Black Sun. And I know we went into a lot more of detail on that roundtable for that one too.
Wow.
So,
And I think Neil's brother read that poem at Selena's funeral. So
yes.
that's another
Oh
little,
wow.
yeah, that's pretty heavy duty.
Yeah. Wow.
Yep, Danny read that one.
Yeah, there you go.
Wow.
Well,
Well,
after Vapor Trails, there was Snakes and Arrows and then Counterparts. For
Clockwork.
Snakes and Clockwork. Oh golly,
We knew
what
what
is
you
wrong
meant.
with my brain? Thank you.
A lot
Yes,
going on
thank you.
here.
take some more
Apparently,
Mucinex, Jim.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, for Snakes and Arrows, all I have is the song Spindrift, inspired by Robert Frost's Epitaph. So,
The entire album actually pulled, and the epitaph that I was like go for David on that one. But the epitaph actually comes from the whole idea of having help me, lovers quarrel with the world.
Yes.
Is from a
oh,
lesson for today.
yes.
The original writing is a lesson for today, because that we have been covering on the most recent Snakes and Arrows roundtables. That theme will
We'll
come up in
continue.
every single song and
Oh,
every
wow. Yeah.
And the story behind that, Neil came up with this title, Snakes and Arrows. So he said that he went and thought, I want to make sure I'm not duplicating or plagiarizing what somebody else did. So he Googled Snakes and Arrows, and that's when he found, this, right? The Yoga of Snakes and Arrows, a Leela of Self-Knowledge. And on the first leg of the Snakes and Arrows tour, the second half of the show was opened up with this video of Alex doing a lot of goofy Alex stuff. But if in the book, it's actually if you do the Yoga of Snakes and Arrows, it's a game that leads you through self-examination and whatnot. And it comes with this game board, which can't see that really well. But that's every square is what's in that second video, or the video for the second half of the show in the first leg, which
Yeah.
means the video in the second
Oh,
leg, the 2008. But they drew that all from there. And of course, I'm sure that Haruishi Hari would look at that and be entirely, like this is blasphemy. I don't know, or maybe he has a good sense of humor. I shouldn't judge.
Maybe not. Yeah.
Um,
Or so.
but that's where that came from, all from this particular book by Harishi Hari. And so even though that book didn't inspire the record, when Neil discovered that Snakes and Arrows already existed, went back and studied it, that ended up being a lot of the artwork for the album and the inspiration for how they approached it live and whatnot. So.
I
And
guess
stay tuned. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to say that in his, I guess, his researching of that, he was thinking of all the other permutations like snakes and ladders, but also Hamlet,
Shoots and arrows,
slings and arrows from Hamlet.
Yep.
Hmm.
I was just going to say, and stay tuned because it's interesting to go from Vapor Trails where thematically they use the tarot as the kind of the exoskeleton, and then with this where Snakes and Arrows, even as David said, it came after the writing of the actual album, but we're playing with the idea of doing a series of episodes based on the themes of each album. So this, you will be hearing this again.
Yeah.
So.
Yep.
Well, I got a quick one.
Oh yeah.
Dover Beach by Matthew Arnold, 1867. There's a line in the poem that I guess Neil wanted to do a tribute to this author. And the line is, confused alarms of struggle and flight. So, of course, that's from Armor and Sword. And he talked about that in the game of Snakes and Arrows, the little video that came out along with the T-shirt and the whole thing when the album came out. So he talks about that a little bit. So it's nice that he gives a little bit of a tribute to an author, which isn't unusual. I mean, Pi Dubois, they have a close relationship working, of course, with the previous record, with There Is a Lake Between the Sun and Moon, which just became Sun and Moon. And I think he basically almost quoted that poem verbatim with a couple little switches around, if I'm not mistaken. So, but it's something I wanted to mention about this record. A nice tribute to an author.
Well, what was the name of that poem?
Dover Beach.
Dover Beach. Okay.
Yeah, Dover Beach by Matthew Arnold.
Okay. All right.
That came out in 1867. So it's, you couldn't ask him for, anything, obviously, but, hey, can I use your poem in this song? That didn't happen.
Yeah.
Dover Beach.
Dover Beach. All right. Wow. And then, Clockwork Angels, we get this title right now. There we go. Right. I mean, the whole, and I don't have any literary references for Clockwork Angels, but, and I think Neil and Kevin wrote it after. Is that right? They wrote the novels after the album.
Neil had come up with the idea, the general story. And then I don't know whether it was before or after the album. I'd have to go back and look at the copyright dates. But
Yeah,
it was Neil's original he
that's
conceived
his
this
thought.
story
Yeah.
and then worked with Kevin Anderson, who is a brilliant novelist.
Oh yeah.
How he can create a story. Dude writes 100
Yeah.
books a year. I have no idea how he does it.
I don't I don't either.
And go back and see the episode where Jim interviewed Kevin J. Anderson.
Yeah, that was fun. Kevin J. Anderson he's such a great storyteller. Just,
His mind is always like creating stories. And how
oh
he
yeah.
writes books, he goes off on a hike and dictates and then
Yeah.
comes back later and transcribes
I
it.
guess he
He's not
transcribes
sitting
it,
in
yeah.
front of a computer typing. He just tells
Yeah.
the story. So he's very much a narrative
Yeah.
sort of soul. And
Yep.
yeah, awesome guy.
Oh yeah.
And also,
Now,
Candida from Voltaire was a huge inspiration to the beginning of the whole Clockwork Angels scenario. And also, the Sawwheat Factor was another impetus and creative engine. So,
yeah. And another one for Clockwork Angels, Neil was a huge fan of David Foster Wallace.
Right.
And the line, time is the infinite jest, comes from this,
Yeah.
if you know anything about David Foster Wallace, this is like his densest novel. It's about 900 pages, you know.
Oh,
But
that's a
Clockwork
lot of
Angels has
pages.
nothing to do with this novel, but the line "Time is the infinite jest" was inspired by his love of David Foster Wallace. And you can again go to neilpeart.net, click on Bubba's book club. There are a lot of references to
Wow.
David Foster Wallace in there as well.
And actually, there was something I know when I was reading the Clockwork Angels novel, I was coming across a lot of other references where Neil was pulling certain ideas, and Candide by Voltaire was one of them. Um,
Yeah.
and I think there's something else by John Barth that he was doing too. Actually, I suppose if I just look over at our, some of the things that I was writing out, I could just say the Sotweed Factor, 1960, John Barth, the Sotweed Factor, and I'd had Candide down here. So yeah, there are certain other writers Neil was envisioning to kind of pull together his notes for obviously their magnum opus, so to speak.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Keep those at the ready when we get to those roundtables.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Snakes
All
and
right.
Arrows
What?
is a long album, but we'll get to Clockwork Angels pretty soon
Yeah.
before we know it.
Well, I think what'll probably take the longest time on the roundtables for Snakes and Arrows is the description for the lyrics in Malignant Narcissism.
Yeah,
I think that'll take a
that's be it.
while.
Yeah,
And that video
heavy lift.
Pretty
that
hard.
they did the
Yeah.
official video for Malignant Narcissism, so cool.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Work of
Rosetta
Yeah,
art.
and
Thurwood.
I'm assuming that everybody who's watching this knows that I'm just trying to be funny and probably failing at it because that's an instrumental.
We're entering the roundtable snakes and arrows phase where I get a vacation because there are no lyrics coming up on a couple of these, so I will be noticeably missing.
Yeah,
Ah,
I know. I'd been thinking about that as far as the roundtable for Hope. Is that just basically going to be like 10 minutes where a few of us get together, talk about the chord progression, and it's like, all right, that's the song. We're out.
Probably. And that's fine.
Yes.
I
yeah,
can
that's
I
okay.
can bloviate on that for hours because it's called Hope. How do there's no words, but how do these lyrics and notes and chord progressions, what does that say about hope and why was hope important on that album? And so see, I just did the episode.
Save it for the
There you go.
Well, there you
episode.
go.
Save it for the
Yeah.
episode.
Thanks for coming.
Sorry.
All
All right.
right, do we have anything else or we run through our gamut here?
Like, which ones did we miss? I'm sure we missed plenty. Leave them in the
Uh
comments. Let us know.
yeah. Yeah.
Skipped a couple just to leave it open for
Mm.
a dialogue. Talk to us.
Yeah, great
What
point.
are your
Or
favorite books that you were inspired by Rush lyrics or your knowledge of Neil and what he read that you went and sought out these authors? And
Mm.
do that and don't order them from Amazon.
yeah, order from the author. Like,
Go to
yeah.
half price books. I mean, there's so many
Yeah.
books that I'll go like AJ Cronin and some of
Yeah.
these others that Neil read. That's like I'll just make a note. And then when I go to half price books, or there's a wonderful bookstore in Denton, Texas, close to my home called Recycled Books. And you
Mm.
can find so many of these books,
Oh
so many of these
yeah.
books, and
Yeah.
it's an adventure too, because order from Amazon, you order it, you get it, you know.
Yeah.
But you go to these bookstores, is like, is it there? Is it not there? You know,
Yeah.
you keep going and
It's
you find this
it's
stuff. And
kind of it's kind of like that. It's sort of like the journey that we would take when all of us were youngsters and we would go to a record store or a bookstore because that's all that was available
go
back
Mm.
through,
then, right?
yeah.
Looking through everything, saying, "Oh, do they have it?" And being elated when you find, the one that you were seeking.
Well, and,
Yeah.
at this point, there are more and more independent bookstores and record stores have been opening. So
Yeah,
chances are
it's great.
good, if you're in a city, if you're in I mean, the town of 2,000 people that I grew up in has had a bookstore for about the last 10 years. So, I
Yes.
mean, even these dinky little towns have bookstores and they're more than happy to take your order as
Yeah.
opposed
Yep.
to
And
giving more money to them.
Yeah, and it's like you can
Yeah.
find a lot of the old books, or again, that's the journey, the adventure to discover the old book you're looking for. But they can also order the new books.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's going to cost you a little
True.
more than Amazon, and your Prime membership and
But
whatnot.
you're supporting those local bookstores, and that's always a good thing, to support the local
I
ones.
remember
Jeff
dragging my
Bezos
kids.
may not be able to buy another yacht, and that makes us feel sad.
I remember
That's
dragging my
okay.
kids
So,
looking for an audiobook on CD. I'm on multiple CDs, I might add.
Oh wow.
6 different stores before we found it. So
Wow.
those were the
Yeah.
days.
Or when in doubt, libraries still exist.
Yeah.
That's true.
I've actually
Right.
gotten updated cards for my county and then the surrounding counties. And even on the website, there is much that can be had, and libraries are still very valid.
Yep.
so
What would Neil do?
Yeah.
He'd
the
seek
most
out the book.
excellent thing you can do.
Yeah.
Yep.
See, I love libraries, but my problem is you might notice I kind of have an addiction,
Yeah.
and that's what's behind. I like to have my own copy of everything.
Yeah.
Well, that's fun to have that. I'm I need to expand my space here in my little what my wife and daughter has dubbed my room as my Mojo Dojo drum room after they saw the Barbie
I
movie.
do not
So
have too many books. I have too few bookshelves.
yes.
Now, David, I have to ask a question. Are you by any chance a tourist? Because I heard books are for
But
tourists.
those
So
books
Books
are
are
for
for
tourists.
tourists.
someone said, I don't know who
I
it
am a
was.
tourist. I am a tourist through humanity.
Nice save.
Discover them through books. I'm such a bullshitter. Jeez.
Nice
What a
save.
that's
Nice
and a
save.
funny reference too. Slovovich.
There's a great essay by Italian philosopher Umberto Eco. He has a great little book called How to Travel with the Salmon and Other Essays, and they're hysterical. They're funny. I mean, he's written all this very highfalutin philosophy. He was what's called a semiotician, which is science and symbols and language and how they work. But his essays are just so much fun. And he wrote this one on how to justify a private library. And his own personal
Ah,
library had 30,000 volumes.
wow.
And
That's a lot of volumes.
So
So people
words.
say, "Have you read all those?" No, they're just,
Yeah.
like my
Oh.
wine cellar. Not that I have one. I'm thinking, Getty. Um, have you drank all those bottles of wine? No, they're waiting to be discovered. And same with
They will
books.
be, yeah, that's true. Well, I think Neil he really would dive into a lot of books, and he wound up discovering some and passed them on to all of us fans through his lyrics, and I think that was a really awesome thing. And hey, it got a bunch of rocker people to start talking about literature and to talk about books, probably way more than like I'm gonna guess more so than you know fans of some other bands who do not use a lot of literary references. I don't want to insult any other bands because I love many, many, many other bands.
Right. That's
But
one gift
yeah,
that Rush
he
gave
did.
was
He
to
gave that.
inspire us to
They gave us a
literature.
gift. Yep. All right. Well, everybody, thanks for sticking with us. I guess we made it through in 2 parts. We didn't have to go to a third part and make this. So this is a 2-part trilogy. Yep. This will be our
Gangster
2-part
of
trilogy
books.
there. Gangster of Books trilogy, yeah, in 2 parts. Yeah. Thank you guys. So please leave a comment. Let us know your thoughts on everything. I think a couple people mentioned stuff too before. So let us know. And hey, if you have any ideas for roundtables, let us know that. And if you interested to come on and let us know that. And hey, we'll just take it from
Just might
there.
happen.
Yeah. All right, guys, take it easy.
Gotcha. Aloha.